I destroyed 3 lives the day I announced the casting for The Crucible. My husband's, my leading students', and my own. Though if I'm being honest, the destruction started long before that. Probably the moment Lucas Reed walked into my theater with his leather messenger bag and director's notebook, looking nothing like the assistant I'd requested from the board. "You're late," I said, not looking up from my annotated script. Auditions were starting in 20 minutes, and I needed everything perfect. The fall production would determine my future at Wellington Prep. Perfect shows meant tenure, and tenure meant security. "Actually, I'm right on time." His voice carried through the empty auditorium like he owned it. "Lucas Reed, and you must be the infamous Sophia Martinez." I looked up then, taking in his casual confidence, the way he seemed completely unfazed by my cold welcome. Most new teachers at Wellington were nervous, eager to please. Lucas looked like he'd stepped out of a contemporary theater magazine, artfully disheveled in a way that took actual effort. "Infamous? Your reputation precedes you. 3 consecutive state championships, unprecedented for a prep school theater program." He dropped his bag in the seat beside me. Though I heard last year's Glass Menagerie was a bit safe. My jaw clenched. Last year's play had been perfect, technically flawless. And yes, safe. Because safe meant secure. Safe meant keeping my position. Safe meant... "We should review the audition criteria," I said, changing the subject. "I have very specific requirements for..." "Let me guess. Emma Phillips for Abigail Williams?" I stiffened. Emma had been my star for 3 years running. She understood my vision, followed direction perfectly, never questioned my choices. "Emma's very talented." "Emma's very predictable," Lucas countered, pulling out his own annotated script. "And Abigail Williams is anything but predictable." Before I could respond, the auditorium doors opened. Ethan walked in, carrying the lunch I'd forgotten at home. He did that a lot lately. Small acts of thoughtfulness I barely acknowledged. "Hey, babe. Thought you might need..." He trailed off, noticing Lucas. "Lucas Reed," Lucas stood, extending his hand. "Assistant director. You must be the husband. Ethan Martinez, environmental lawyer and occasional lunch delivery guy." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Though I'm surprised Sophia agreed to an assistant. She usually prefers total control. "The board insisted," I said quickly, "for the scholarship program." "Ah, right. The scholarship." Ethan's tone shifted slightly. "Speaking of which, I'm meeting with Zara Johnson's family tomorrow. She's auditioning, isn't she?" Zara Johnson, the scholarship student everyone kept talking about. The one who'd gotten into Wellington on pure talent rather than family connections. The one who could potentially ruin everything I'd built. "We'll see who shows up to audition," I said dismissively. "Thanks for lunch." Ethan lingered a moment too long, like he wanted to say more, but he just nodded, gave Lucas another measured look, and left. "Interesting dynamic," Lucas observed once the door closed. "What's interesting is how behind schedule we are." I stood, gathering my materials. "The students will be here soon." But Lucas was already moving toward the stage, his presence somehow filling the space in a way that made me uncomfortable. Or maybe comfortable in a way that made me uncomfortable. "You know," he said, running his hand along the curtain, "sometimes the most interesting theater happens when we lose control." Students began filing in then, including Emma Phillips with her perfect posture and practiced smile. And behind her, Zara Johnson, radiating the kind of raw talent that couldn't be taught or controlled. I gripped my director's notebook tighter, ignoring the way Lucas watched me watch them. The destruction had already begun. I just didn't know it yet. The auditions went exactly as I'd planned, mostly. Emma performed with technical precision, hitting every emotional beat I'd worked with her on over the summer. But Zara was wild, unpredictable, electric. She didn't just read Abigail's lines, she became them. "That's what real passion looks like," Lucas whispered, leaning close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Not manufactured perfection." I shifted away, making another note in my book. Passion without discipline is chaos, and discipline without passion is dead. The auditorium lights felt too bright suddenly, too exposing. I called the next student, deliberately avoiding both Lucas's knowing smile and Zara's hopeful eyes. That evening, I sat in my home office staring at the casting list. Ethan's footsteps approached, then stopped at the doorway. "Long day?" I mumbled, not looking up. "How was Lucas?" Something in his tone made me pause. Fine, professional. Professional, Ethan repeated. Like the way he touched your shoulder during lunch break? Or the way you kept looking at him during auditions? Don't be ridiculous. But my voice sounded defensive even to my own ears. I was focused on the students. Right. Speaking of students, Zara's audition? I haven't decided the casting yet. Sophia. He stepped into the room. That girl has something special. Even I could see it, and I know nothing about theater. You're right, I snapped. You don't know anything about theater, or what it takes to maintain excellence, or what I have to do to. To what? Keep control? Keep your perfect record? Keep your star student happy? To keep my job. The words burst out louder than intended. Do you think Wellington parents pay $40,000 a year for experimental theater? They want proven success, predictable excellence. Is that what you want? I finally looked at him then, really looked at him. When had he started seeming so bland? So safe? When had safety started feeling like surrender? What I want, I said carefully, is to go to bed. It's late. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay awake thinking about Zara's raw talent, Lucas's challenging presence, Emma's dependable perfection. At 3 a.m., I made my decision. The next morning, I posted the cast list early, before anyone else arrived. Emma would play Abigail. Zara was her understudy. Lucas found me in my office, casting sheet in hand. This is a mistake. This is my show. Is it? He moved closer, voice low. Or is it just another safe choice? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Another step closer. You're scared. I'm practical. You're trapped. His hand brushed mine as he took the script I was holding. In your marriage, in your career, in your own need for control. I jerked away, but my back hit the wall. When had I backed up? When had he gotten so close? This isn't appropriate, I whispered. Neither is sabotaging a talented student because you're afraid of change. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Zara's voice, thick with tears. Emma's practiced sympathy. And underneath it all, Catherine Morgan's controlled anger. Mrs. Martinez? Catherine appeared in my doorway, her expression grave. A word? I stepped away from Lucas, straightening my blazer. Of course. But as I followed Catherine out, I caught Lucas's reflection in the window, watching me with a mixture of disappointment and something else. Something that made my pulse race in a way Ethan hadn't managed in years. The destruction was accelerating, and somewhere deep down, part of me welcomed it. Catherine led me to her classroom, where Zara sat crying while Emma hovered nearby, performing concern with Oscar-worthy precision. The sight should have validated my casting decision. Instead, it made my stomach turn. Zara, Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. Would you give us a moment? As the girls left, I caught Emma's slight smirk. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd learned manipulation from the best, from me. What exactly are you doing, Sophia? Catherine closed the door. Making the best choice for the production. No. Catherine's normally warm brown eyes hardened. You're making the safe choice for yourself. And in doing so, you're destroying a gifted student's chance at a scholarship to Juilliard. My chest tightened. What? The Juilliard Scout is coming to see our production, specifically to see the scholarship students. Ethan arranged it. Ethan. Of course he had. My perfect, thoughtful husband, always fighting for the underdogs while I wasn't aware. Because you didn't ask. You were too busy with your new assistant director. Heat crept up my neck. Lucas has nothing to do with. The entire faculty sees it, Sophia. The lingering looks, the late-night rehearsals. Does Ethan know? There's nothing to know, I snapped, but even I didn't believe my tone. Really? Then why did you give Emma the lead when even she knows Zara was better? Because Emma was safe. Because Zara was dangerous. Because Lucas made me feel seen in a way that terrified me. I need to go, I muttered, turning toward the door. Sophia? Catherine's voice stopped me. You're not just risking your marriage anymore. You're risking everything you've built here. I wanted to argue, but at that moment, my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. My office. We need to talk about the blocking. My finger hovered over the reply button. The choice is yours, Catherine said quietly. But remember, some things, once broken, can't be fixed. I walked out without responding, my heels clicking against the polished floors like a metronome counting down to disaster. Students parted before me, whispering. Had they always whispered? Had I always been so aware of it? Lucas's office door was closed. I shouldn't open it. Shouldn't step inside. Shouldn't. Lock it, he said when I entered. And I did. What happened next was both exactly what you're thinking and nothing like it at all. Because while there was passion, God was their passion, there was also calculation in the way his hand cupped my face, in the way he whispered about my talent, my vision, my power, in the way he suggested changes to the production that would showcase Emma even more. I was being played like one of my own carefully orchestrated scenes. And the worst part, I knew it and didn't care. That evening, I arrived home late, reeking of guilt and Lucas's cologne. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal papers. The Johnsons called. He said without looking up, Zara's dropping out of the production and school. What? She can't? Can't she? Now he did look up, and his eyes were tired, so tired. Her mother works 3 jobs to cover what the scholarship doesn't. They can't afford to waste time on productions where she'll never get a real chance. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Sophia? Explain it to me. Explain any of it. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How could I explain choices I barely understood myself? I'm staying at my brother's tonight, he said, gathering his papers. Maybe longer. Figure out what you want, Sophia. Because right now, you're destroying a lot more than just our marriage. As his car pulled away, my phone buzzed again. Lucas, with notes for tomorrow's rehearsal. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back. The destruction was complete. Now came the fallout. The next week passed in a blur of rehearsals, stolen moments, and increasingly frantic texts from Ethan that I left unanswered. Emma thrived under the spotlight, while Lucas's influence over the production and me grew stronger each day. Then Catherine dropped the bomb during Thursday's faculty meeting. The board is conducting a review of the drama department, she announced, not looking at me. All casting decisions and personal conduct will be examined. Personal conduct. The whispers around the table grew louder. Lucas squeezed my knee under the table, but for the first time the touch felt less like passion and more like possession. I pulled away, catching Catherine's knowing glance as I did. After the meeting, I found Zara cleaning out her theater locker. You don't have to leave, I said, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. She turned, and the look in her eyes was worse than anger. It was resignation. Actually, Mrs. Martinez, I do. But don't worry, I'm sure Emma will be perfect. She shouldered her bag. That's all that matters, right? Being perfect. Before I could respond, Lucas appeared. Everything okay here? Just fine, Zara said, her voice dripping with teenage sarcasm. I was just telling Mrs. Martinez how interesting it is that the casting changed after your private meeting in your office last week. The one where you forgot to close the blinds? My blood ran cold. That's quite an accusation, Lucas said smoothly. One that could damage a lot of reputations. Yeah, Zara nodded. It could. She walked away, leaving me staring at Lucas. You said you locked the door. I did. His smile didn't reach his eyes. But theater is all about perspective, isn't it? What people think they see. What people think they... Understanding dawned like a spotlight. You wanted someone to see. The board needed evidence of compromised judgment. He shrugged. Catherine suggested. Catherine? We've been documenting your decisions for months. The favoritism, the manipulation, the affair. He actually had the audacity to look apologetic. Wellington can't risk a scandal, especially not with the new scholarship program launching. The walls seemed to close in. You used me. You used yourself, Sophia. I just provided the stage. I ran, past Emma practicing her lines, past Catherine's concerned face, past the whispers and stares. I drove home on autopilot, only to find Ethan in our driveway, talking to Zara's mother. Sophia, he said, his voice heavy, we need to talk. Inside, the truth spilled out like blood from a stage wound. How Ethan had helped create the scholarship program. How he'd been building cases for families like the Johnsons who'd been discriminated against in private schools. How my affair with Lucas and sabotage of Zara had given them exactly the evidence they needed. The board is offering you a chance to resign quietly, he said finally. Catherine advocated for that much. And us? My voice cracked. There is no us anymore. He stood, wedding ring already absent. You chose your perfect production over everything else. I hope it was worth it. But there would be no production, no tenure, no marriage, no reputation. just the hollow echo of applause I'd never hear. 6 months later, I sat in the back row of Wellington's auditorium, watching Zara perform as Abigail Williams. Catherine had taken over the drama department with a new emphasis on student development over competition. The production wasn't perfect. There were missed cues, slightly mistimed lighting changes, moments where the passion overwhelmed the precision. It was beautiful. Lucas had disappeared after the scandal broke, presumably to find another school. Another director to manipulate. Emma's parents had transferred her to a different private school, where I heard she was doing exactly what was expected of her. Just like I had, for so many years. Ethan sat a few rows ahead with his new girlfriend, a public defender who shared his passion for social justice. They were working together on expanding the scholarship program to other private schools. He looked happy, relaxed, free. As Zara delivered Abigail's final monologue, I felt Catherine slide into the seat beside me. "Brave of you to come," she said quietly. "I almost didn't, but you did. That's growth." I watched Zara command the stage with raw, imperfect passion. She's incredible. She is. The Juilliard Scout thinks so too. My chest tightened. Good, that's good. "You know," Catherine said, "we have an opening for a junior drama teacher, part-time, working under supervision, for someone willing to learn a different way of teaching." I turned to her, surprised. "After everything I did?" "Because of everything you did. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who've learned the hardest lessons." On stage, Zara's voice rose in righteous anger, but there was vulnerability beneath it, human imperfection making the performance real. "I'd have to start over," I whispered. "Yes, but this time, maybe try starting with truth instead of perfection." The lights dimmed for the final scene. In the darkness, I felt tears on my cheeks, not for what I'd lost, but for what I might still find. "I'll think about it," I said. Catherine squeezed my hand once, then let go. Just like that. No manipulation, no power play, no hidden agenda. Just grace. As the audience burst into genuine, enthusiastic applause, I stayed in my seat watching Zara take her bow. She caught my eye for a moment, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not because I deserved it, but because she'd grown beyond needing to hold on to the hurt I'd caused. She was already becoming something more than my mistakes had allowed for. Maybe I could too. I joined the standing ovation, clapping until my hands hurt. For Zara, for Catherine, for Ethan, for all the imperfect, beautiful moments I'd been too blind to see when I was chasing perfection. The stage lights dimmed one final time, and in the darkness I finally understood. Sometimes the most powerful spotlight is the one that shows us our own flaws. And sometimes the greatest performance is simply being brave enough to begin again.